So hello, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our second panel today on space and cybersecurity law in Europe, which we're going to dive into for the next 45 minutes. And so from the previous discussions that we have here from yesterday's workshops and today, the keynote speaker, we have heard it has become very evident and clear on the rapid evolution of cyber threats. And today's discussion will focus on how we can address these challenges through effective regulatory frameworks. And before diving into the questions, I would like to do a quick introduction of myself, of the panelists and the topic. So my name is Gloria Kõgel. I work at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications of Estonia at Space Policy Department, where one of the key initiatives at the moment is developing Estonia's very first national space law, which I believe most of you have already heard of. Some of you have read about it already, and some of you who were participating yesterday in the Estonian Space Law Workshop already got to hear the great overview of Estonian national space law draft by one of our panelists, Liisi, Jürgen. And so I'd like to welcome Liisi, who is attorney at law and a partner and head of IT in NJORD law firm, who focus areas are e-commerce, data protection, and IT. And Liisi is one of the core members who has helped and helping ministry to draft the space law. So welcome.
Thank you.
And next I'm very pleased to also introduce Francesco Casaril, who is a PhD student in cybersecurity at IMT School for Advanced Studies Lucca, and who has a background in space policy, and whose research focuses on space technologies, particularly satellite networks and infrastructure security.
Thank you.
So, and the topic of today's panel is particularly complex because it intersects two rapidly evolving and intricate fields, space law on one hand and cybersecurity law on the other hand, and both domains are facing unprecedented challenges due to the rapid development of technology. And as space activities increase, space law must counter and regulate future scenarios, which is challenging. And meanwhile, in cybersecurity faces new threats and vulnerabilities, especially as space systems become more integrated into everyday infrastructures. So with this context in mind, let's explore where we stand with cybersecurity regulations in the space domain in Europe. And considering that European Union space law draft has not yet been public, and we don't know when it will be, and there is currently no specific law governing cybersecurity for space activities in Europe, I'd like to start with the following questions to both of you. That how would you evaluate the current legal landscape for space cybersecurity at both European national level and EU level? Are the regulations that are at the moment sufficient? Is there a need for amendments, or there's a clear need for entirely new laws that are specifically regulating cybersecurity aspects in space activities? So we can start off with Liisi.
Yeah, here we have to keep in mind that in Estonia we do not yet have our own Space Law Act. It is still in draft, and everyone has opportunity to give their opinions regarding this act, and you are welcome to do that on one hand. But when we look into this Estonian Space Law Act, then we try to keep it as simple as possible. Of course, the word simple is also subjective, and everyone has a very different understanding what the simple is, but we really try to not over-regulate it. Specifically, we have to keep in mind what the cybersecurity is. Those requirements, what we consider today accurate cybersecurity requirements, will be outdated tomorrow. And the legal act must also be as neutral as possible to support this principle. We cannot provide in legal act very specific rules regarding technology, regarding cybersecurity or any other related matter, because otherwise we need to change the legal acts all the time, and legislator is rather slow for reason. But the technology develops itself rather fast. So we have to keep in mind that we keep legal acts as technology neutral as possible, and this applies also cybersecurity area as well. So when we go now on the EU level, then EU legislator loves to issue all kind of different legal acts and loves to over-regulate as well. So I am a little bit afraid that when we are going to have at some point some sort of EU Space Law Act, then most certainly they have also some sort of regulation regarding cybersecurity as well. But now legislator, specifically EU legislator, should keep in mind, is it necessary? EU legislator has already issued quite many different cybersecurity related legal acts. There is also no need to repeat yourself all the time. Sometimes cross-reference is also a good tool to use, and that the principle we had also here in Estonia. So Estonia has already Estonian General Cybersecurity Act, and we also, in our Space Law Act, we also used those references because the principles were already in place. We didn't thought that there is a need to repeat them and copy-paste them once again. It will cause only confusion. So we tried to keep it as simple, and this recommendation would be also to EU legislator. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesco, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that if we start looking at the European landscape, we are already a step ahead, I would say, from other countries like the United States, where space is not yet considered as a critical infrastructure sector. But, for example, in the US, critical infrastructures, they have a sector resilience management agency. So they have an entity that is in charge of the resilience of these sectors. And we don't have a clear governance in terms of space cybersecurity in Europe. I think there is a small gap, but indeed there is also a big risk of over-regulating, because if we look at European policies like NIS2 or the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, they already address the space sector. They already provide some baseline cybersecurity requirements, but someone argues that NIS2, for example, addresses only the ground station operators, so doesn't take into account the whole complexity of the space supply chain. A lot of actors are out of the scope of this regulation, a lot of space actors. And also, I would say there is the issue of creating a fragmented policy landscape in Europe, because we see a lot of member states that, and it's good that they're doing so, producing space laws. Estonia, Italy is also discussing today in the parliament the first space law of the country that may include resilience requirements. But if member states act separately, there is a risk indeed of fragmentation. And I think there are small gaps that are not filled by the current European policies. Of course, this is not a valid argument to create a completely new framework that may hinder innovation. Many of the elements that exist in the policies that we have now can be applied already, but they are not. And at the moment, there are no cybersecurity requirements for space companies in Europe, and this is, I think, a gap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But when we are thinking about looking at mandatory requirements versus voluntary guidelines, what is, in your opinion, a more appropriate approach? Should there be, to some certain extent, or to what extent there should be minimum requirements, and how much should be there room for voluntary guidelines?
Principles must be clear. So those main rules must be provided in legal act. All kind of guidelines should interpret those main principles. They should help to understand what is behind those main principles. Cybersecurity generally is rather expensive field, and we have to keep in mind as well that everything which is very secure, the user convenience goes down usually. So here we have to also take into account that for instance, space operators, they should also have their own self-regulation and self-control mechanism as well in place. And legislator should support that possibility. Also in Estonian space law draft, we have kept also in mind that this self-regulation, self-control is a main part that how, for instance, operators can put place their own internal rules, proceedings, also regarding cybersecurity.
Thank you. Before I will go to Francesco, I forgot to mention that we also have live polling questions, so you can also log in and see your in your devices answer one of the key questions. So one of the first poll questions that we have is about what do you think, which is more appropriate approach?
When I may also something to addition. EU member states are rule of law countries, which means that regulators and public authorities, governmental bodies, can check only those rules or those requirements which are provided in law. They cannot check anything else which is outside of the law. That's why it is very important that the main aspects, the main principles are provided then in the law. Otherwise, regulator doesn't have a task and or they do not know or they don't have even obligation to control anything. So both those documents, what you mentioned, have their own role to play.
Yeah. I'm also for, I would say, a mixed approach because, and this is also among the policy options that the European Commission developed for the space law, for example. They launched an open consultation and they asked representatives from the private sector what kind of approach would they prefer. And also, I think the mixed approach would be the right one because there should be basic principles in terms of risk management, risk assessment, reporting, and responding to incidents. But then when it comes to specific technical requirements, they should be mission-based and depending indeed on the goals of the company, which kind of contracts and projects they are involved in. Because indeed we cannot follow up, laws cannot follow up on the technological development. We cannot set standards that are going to be there for a lot of years in the space sector. We see technology evolving so fast. Therefore, a mixed approach is for sure the only way forward.
Thank you. And a little bit touching on the previous two questions, that what do you think when we compare the two approaches of harmonized law in EU level and versus handling cybersecurity laws on national levels? What do you think, in your opinion, would be better approach? And this is also the next poll question that we have. Sorry, we can see that what are the results of the first question. So most of the responders say that mixed approach is the most appropriate in this way. And as we heard that, panelists agree with that. So the next question, I will put the next poll question here, which is, should space cybersecurity regulations be harmonized across Europe or handled at a national level? So perhaps, Francesco, you can start.
I mean, this is a really delicate topic because we know that security is a matter of member states, is a priority of member states. And there's been a big debate in the European Union and the Commission as if there are the legal basis to have a space law. The Commission wants to produce this space law under the Article 14, so economic competitiveness, Article 14 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. So wants to justify the need for a European space law, an urbanized one, because we need to ensure the economic competitiveness of the European space sector. But many argue that the European Commission has not the power to harmonize space laws. And this is still something that is debated, and I think it's why also the space law has been postponed. In my opinion, there are more benefits than risks in having a European space law. Of course, we cannot exclude a lot of risks, but we cannot exclude the fact that all the member states could have different requirements, and therefore some companies may be advantaged compared to others, and therefore we risk again to fragment the space market that we see already is really fragmented. Otherwise, having a unique approach, unique requirements for everyone, we can guarantee, let's say, a more harmonized competition, and we can guarantee that some countries will take also, let's say, advantage of it, meaning, I don't know, Estonia has well-established security and cybersecurity competencies and can take advantage of promoting its services and selling them to other countries that are more advanced, I don't know, in launching, in Earth observation, data value-added services, and don't have the knowledge about cybersecurity. Of course, there are also some risks in having an urbanized approach, but I think this is a good approach. Yeah.
Thank you. Liisi.
I am a little bit skeptical from the start regarding this EU Space Law Act. And regarding that matter also, or therefore I'm also skeptical regarding the cybersecurity regulation on the space cybersecurity regulation on the EU level. I have also attended a few meetings regarding Commission where they gave a little overview about the possible EU Space Law Act. And then the word cybersecurity was used even more than the words and or, which means that it's a little bit like a trendy word to pop here, pop there, but it is also possible to keep it kind of like empty or without content. So I think it's a little bit risky. It's very easy to say from a policymaker, oh, everything is secure, everything is this or that, but are we so sure, do we really need it? And or maybe we just make our bureaucratic processes just slower, bigger, more expensive, and so on. So I think on the national level, it should be definitely regulated. On the EU level, I'm still a little bit skeptical. I haven't seen, of course, the draft as well, so maybe I'm a little bit too critical.
Okay, thank you. So you can see most of the audience are agreeing that, not agreeing, but they're saying that it should be harmonized on EU level. So we can move on from here to more the implementation side. A question for Liisi. It's about the preparedness. What do you think, should space entities be legally required to demonstrate how they would respond to cybersecurity incidents? And if so, what might such requirements involve in terms of regulatory compliance and liability?
The short answer will be yes. Now the question is that how much you should be able to demonstrate how accordingly your systems are according to the valid cybersecurity requirements. Like I also mentioned that EU states, but also Estonia is a rule of law country, which means that everything can be taken place based on the law or according to the law, which means that regulator can control only those aspects which is provided in law. So some requirements must be provided in law, and we also have Estonian own Cybersecurity Act, which means that operator will be also obligated person according to Cybersecurity Act, which means that our regulator have this right then also to check the cybersecurity requirements. Now, what is space activity? This is also very different things what can fit into this term, space activity. It can be some small student satellite. It can be very complex, dangerous, maybe even activity. So those rules must be also checked then differently. You always have to have a little bit a custom-made approach, which means that here it is very important also this operator's own self-regulation, self-control, and they have to be able to approve that they have systems in place, they have proceedings in place, and when there will be some sort of incident, then they are able to act accordingly so that the harm will be, there will be no harm, or the harm will be very minimum as possible.
Thank you very much. And Francesco, would like to ask from you that in your work you have analyzed databases of collected cyber incidents to understand the factors behind these cyber threats. And based on your findings, what type of cyber threats are most prevalent in the space sector, and which areas of the industry seem most vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, in my research, I looked both at the databases of cyber attacks that are existing, and also I looked at the vulnerabilities in the wild using various tools that allow to see what web-facing appliances exist from space companies. And first of all, it's a big challenge because not a lot of companies disclose these breaches like in other sectors. This is not new. But what you see around are a lot of vulnerable appliances like VPN appliances, switches, routers, GNSS receivers, satellite modems, but most of all web-facing applications like website login portals and so on. And the vulnerabilities they have and that are exploited, they are exploited through denial of service maybe and cross-site scripting attacks. But what's more interesting, I think, is that all these vulnerabilities, they highlight how the use of common off-the-shelf components creates a lot of, expands a lot the attack surface in the space sector. But this is not new because we see the same in other critical infrastructure sectors. And I think also replying to the previous question, like about the readiness, I think that incident detection and incident response are really neglected muscles when it comes to the space sector, but also to other ones. And companies, they need to first of all have indicators, early warning indicators that can allow them to understand what's happening inside their network. Monitoring logs is like a translation of this, but there are many other activities that companies should carry out. And also about the response to incidents. Let's say you need to exercise, and you need to be prepared. And how can you do that? For example, in the DORA Act, that is a directive for the financial sector, financial entities are asked to perform stress tests. And in this stress test, they should also simulate cyber attacks against their infrastructure. And this is a requirement that we could use also for the space sector, for space companies asked to test their system, to perform offensive security that has a strong value, because we're not mandating companies to do penetration testing and so on, but that's where you find the most vulnerability of the vulnerabilities. At the European Union level, we have good examples of these techniques, of these practices, because we do something that is called space threat response architecture. Is an exercise, a cyber exercise that the European External Agency, together with ESA and the Commission, performed to simulate attacks, cyber attacks on Copernicus, Galileo. and they do it every year, but indeed is about simulating attacks on European space assets and not on commercial ones. We may want to involve commercial actors in this kind of activities, and with the support of public entities, stress test them and find the vulnerabilities in this way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Liisi, what do you think, like based on these insights that Francesco mentioned, how can these guide the development of legal frameworks to protect against such vulnerabilities?
Keep the rules as simple as possible. No, of course, the operators also, they have to monitor the possible risks and so on. Legislator doesn't have too many working tools here. To keep the legislation as simple as possible is one tool. Not to over-regulate, otherwise we are stuck with those certain rules. Operator can always say that, but my requirements were fulfilled and so on, but it may not be helpful, it may not be accurate, taking all the risk into account. So I would say still that legal act as simple as possible, and then all kind of guidelines and supportive materials a little bit more supporting the legal acts. And once again, the self-regulation, self-monitoring, those aspects are important.
Thank you. And Francesco, to you, well, you mentioned already a bit, but maybe in a little bit other angle, what practical steps do you think should space operators take to prepare for potential cybersecurity incidents?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic principles are they should follow three main pillars in terms of risk management, risk assessment, and then incident reporting and responding. And these are some principles that are already out there, something really basic, but that we're not mandating this to space companies. We're not requiring them to do so. In terms of risk management, asset identification should be a priority, a patch management policy, but also having a business continuity plan. This is something that we should ask companies to do. But also in terms of risk assessment, this is one of the possible requirement of the space law. We want to ask all the companies, the European Commission wants to ask all the companies to perform a risk assessment. And also this is important for the supply chain, because the risk assessment is not only for the company per se, but also for all the other actors involved in the supply chain of the company. And then there should be clear rules and guidelines in terms of incident reporting. Companies, the real goal of the policies should not be to add additional burden on the companies, but to ease the process in case of a cyber attack, meaning telling the companies, okay, you have been breached, you need to report to this entity in this time, and you need to tell them this data, you need to report this data. And also, interestingly, about handling incidents, we can see a case study from the Viasat attack in Ukraine. We see the value of public-private partnership there, because when Viasat was attacked, the National Security Agency, in particular the Cybersecurity Competence Center of the National Security Agency in the United States, provided assistance in dealing with all the requests from the governmental users of Viasat. We know that Viasat was used by the Ukrainian government, and when there was the disruption, Viasat was overwhelmed with the requests of its users that were asking, okay, what happened? How can we mitigate? What should we do? And they couldn't deal with all these requests because it was a big disruption. And the public sector, the NSA, intervened and supported them. This is the kind of public-private partnership that is needed, and these are the kind of mechanisms that should be established. Procedures, clear procedures and governance structures that should be established when an incident occurs. Of course, these are just the basics, but this is something that they're not non-exhaustive requirements, but I think that's some of the baseline scenario that should be defined. Yeah.
Very interesting, thank you. We can see the results of the question. Should space operators be legally required to demonstrate readiness for cybersecurity incidents? And it's good to see that
no one thinks
no
that
one thinks that it shouldn't. So majority think yes. So there's a question to what extent and how should how should the risks be assessed based on the mission and project?
Responsible people in the room.
Yes, very good to see. I would like to move on to a question that touches upon cyber ranges, and the question for you, Liisi. Considering this Estonia's cyber range initiatives, which allows operators to demonstrate their platform security and preparedness for handling cyber incidents, what do you think, would it be at some point conceivable for similar cybersecurity training and simulation exercises to be mandated under space law? What are the benefits and risks and...
Now, space operators need also, regarding cybersecurity, some sort of hubs where they can develop their cybersecurity tools, where they can test them, where they can also maybe receive some sort of certificate or license which says then this is a safe system. Also, regulator needs maybe some sort of test environment where they can test then those operators' systems. So actually we need also some sort of environment where I think this is missing on the market right now also, where the operators and also maybe the regulator can test different systems to check if the needed requirements are fulfilled or not. So I think that there is one empty place to fulfill.
Perfect. I'm sure it will be filled at some point.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I think we can move on to one of the last questions, which is quite wide. I would like to ask both of you, how do you see the landscape of space cybersecurity evolving over the next decade? And also to that question I would add, what role should government and international bodies play in shaping this future? So maybe Francesco, you can start.
I think we see the threat landscapes evolving, and we are going to see more cyber attacks and more sophisticated ones, not only space, in every critical infrastructure sector. Because the cost of these attacks is significantly reducing. There are more web-facing applications, and for a lot of different reasons. What role the government should play? I think it's really important what we discussed here, because we said that the risk is to over-regulate, the risk is to create additional burdens to the companies, and the government should, when developing policies, should think about the impact. And they have done so for the NIS1 directive, for example. The Commission developed an impact assessment report, and they tried to understand what would have been the impacts of this directive on the industry. They should do the same with the space law. And in particular, when designing policies and requirements, I think they should translate them, policymakers, into actionable guidance for companies. So when it comes to a specific cybersecurity requirement, they should say, okay, you should do patch management, but what does that mean? And they should link, in my opinion, policies with quantifiable security metrics that companies can easily apply in order to measure the compliance, but also measure the level of security. I don't know, speaking about patch management, we can link it to mean time to patch as a security metric, but there are a lot of different security metrics in cybersecurity. And also discussing with some companies, the main challenge they face is to understand policy, interpret them, because small and medium enterprises, they don't have a legal team. They don't have the resources to understand and to deeply dive into policy requirements, and they cannot slow down their process and their technological development in order to be fully compliant with complex policies. We need to ease this process from the policymaker's point of view, and it is, I think, the main challenge.
Over-regulation is definitely an issue. there is also the question, what is over-regulated area, what is under-regulated area? You never will find the two people with the same opinion in the same room, most probably in that field as well. Technology sector will get more role and money, most probably, to support cybersecurity products and services for space operators. And definitely also we have to keep our legislation technologically neutral, that all kind of innovation will be supported. When we regulate the space activity, which is actually already regulated in very many countries and on the international level, then every regulated area requires money. So this means that, yes, of course, smaller operators most probably have to think that even if they are able to take part of this activity or not, and then of course legislators should support innovation as well to find the right balance. This is the challenge.
Thank you very much. And now we can take audience questions. We have a few. So one of the questions is, okay, where should we start? Okay. Okay, can Europe alone secure activities in space? Who wants to respond?
Maybe. I mean, it depends what do we intend for Europe. European government, I mean, the government alone, the private sector alone cannot, for sure. Public-private partnerships are needed. There are good examples of this. I would say one that is coming from what they're doing in the United States are information sharing and analysis centers. There is one that has been developed in Europe, is in a kind of early stage because it was founded in 2023. The members are just a few companies and they don't represent the whole space sector, but sharing threat intelligence and being like increasing the solidarity between the companies in the space sector can really help, especially when big companies that are more targeted and face more cyber attacks share the threat techniques and procedures and other interesting intelligence to small and medium enterprises. I think this is really valuable. Of course, there are challenges in terms of sharing intelligence. There needs to be trust relationships between companies, but this is where the public sector can intervene and set the rules to be part of this kind of mechanism and entities. Apart from information sharing, I would say in general, Europe alone, if we consider the private sector, no, but it's a cooperation that can do the job. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question, what is your opinion about the practical impact of NIS2 in space security?
Now here is the thing that it can be over-regulated. When we have NIS2 and the EU Commission threatened to issue another Cybersecurity Act for space operators, then I can see here rather big possibility that we have over-regulated area. The EU Commission should definitely analyze if already existing cybersecurity legal acts are maybe already enough.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, indeed, I think that the basic requirements of the NIS2 are really are some of the same points I mentioned today. So they are a good baseline. But the NIS2, according to some legal interpretation, applies only to ground station operators and doesn't take into consideration the in-orbit environment, the upstream part. So it depends on how do we interpret the NIS2. It may be enough, it may not be enough. And the Commission opinion is that no, we need more. I personally think that depends on the interpretation of the NIS2. If we want to interpret the NIS2 already to apply to the whole space sector, it may be enough. But if we want to have a restrictive interpretation, then there is a gap. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we have a question. Is it criteria for high rise and critical well known? Who is deciding it, European Union or national level?
I'm not sure I understand.
I don't understand the question.
Maybe someone wants to a little bit comment on the question. Yes.
No, there must be criteria in place and those criteria must be also provided in the law to understand what kind of risk is, so to say, high risk, which are low risk. But here, like I already mentioned, this operators' self-regulation and self-control is also important. Operators themselves, they know the best what can be high risk, taking into account their technology, the technology what they use, the IT infrastructure and so on. So I think here this self-control is also, again, important aspect.
Thank you. I think we can move on to the next question.
This was already.
Yep.
There is a trend of new attack vectors made possible through the use of artificial intelligence. Can legislation keep up with this change of threat landscape? What do you think?
No, I can't. That's why we need very general principles, and everything else comes then accordingly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what can keep up is the private sector, maybe sharing intelligence and creating a database of incidents and sharing threat techniques and procedures, how this incident happens, what assets are targeted, what are the entry points, and so on. And maybe the private sector can contribute in keeping up. It's not for sure through regulations that we can follow the threat landscape. It's impossible.
No.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any more questions. I think we have. So how do cybersecurity units adapting to the new rise of AI-enabled attacks, and can it do so while relying on private actors' products? Products subject to risk to sovereignty.
It's not so much space-related question specifically. Every organization must keep an eye on development of technology, the possible cybersecurity acts, is it then, what is the influence of AI and so on. It's not so much specific operator or space regulator specific. It's like every organization has those tasks to fulfill these days.
Yeah, if I understood well, the question is also about relying on private actors. Indeed, this is why we have this problem in Europe. We don't have a sovereign constellation, for example, for satellite communication, and we are planning to do so with IRIS². But of course, if we build the constellation, then we need to have our own proprietary infrastructure on the ground, our own user terminals, and all the rest of the components of this infrastructure. So it's not an easy process. You need to rebuild the whole supply chain at the European Union level, and this is, I think, a challenge that the Commission is aware of and is trying to face. But it will be a long process. It's a long way to go.
Thank you. I think we have time for one No, we don't have.
No.
Okay, we have it. Yeah, we had here a few more questions, but thank you very much, Francesco and Liisi, for your valuable insights. And we definitely have a lot to think about, and it's very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.